357 Hemp Logistics provides fully insured transportation and supply chain management solutions for the hemp industry. From seed to store, hemp is never just another commodity to us. With best-in-class technology and a customer portal, allows you to have 24/7 real-time visibility with our track and trace technology. Secure your hemp logistics partner for both domestic and international shipping by visiting our website at www.357company.com or call us at 844-357-SHIP.
This is Dave with iHemp Michigan. iHemp Michigan's mission is to educate, inform, and promote the research, development, and cultivation of industrial hemp here in Michigan. iHemp Michigan advocates for wellness in people and the planet through hemp, and it begins with the farmer. We're going to move the news to the end of the show today. And Blaine, why don't you introduce our guest? This is going to be interesting.
All right. Well, do we want to have Mike talk first? We're going to move that to the end too.
We're going to move that to the end. Actually, you're going to have Scott. Scott's going to be up first, right?
We can do that then. Yep.
We know what we're doing.
We do. Absolutely.
On the fly.
You know. Yeah. So there's a question on a couple shows ago that we had regarding when Craig Van Buren on about the crop going hot, and is there insurance for that? Or is there a way to protect yourself from that? And Scott Colville with Scott Colville Crop Insurance Agency is a good iHemp member. Texted me, emailed me a little bit later and said, hey, there is a product out there. And so we thought it'd be important to let people know about that. It's a private product that doesn't protect the out there that does protect the hemp if it goes hot. The difference is that rather than insuring the hemp crop, you are basically insuring for weather conditions. So Scott, maybe you can help enlighten us on what that program is all about.
Oh, thank you, Blaine. It is a weather product. Basically it was designed to protect against excess rainfall at planting, excess rainfall at harvesting, and high temperatures during the flowering stages. They've determined those were the biggest areas of concern that the farmers have. The program works by you determine when you're going to plant and when you're going to harvest, and then the computer will figure out when you need the rain, when you don't need the rain, when you need the heat, when you don't need the heat. And so any losses paid is based on what the weather does. And that's why I say it does not matter if it goes hot, because it's all based on what the weather does. So if the weather does not cooperate, then you get a loss payment.
And you select those dates so they know what the actual weather is during those date ranges.
Correct. And there's also different levels of coverage, and they call it 110, 220, 330, which is basically 1 times, 2 times, 3 times. So yes, it's a very highly, you can design it for your particular crop that you want and how much you want to spend.
So basically, like if someone was going to harvest, grow like 50 acres of grain, they could insure their cost of planting, basically, so you would get that cost back. It's not like they're going to make whatever profit margin they would get on a successful harvest, but it would just be a way to cover your costs, should it go bad.
Correct.
Okay. All right. That's useful.
Is there a requirement for this insurance that you have grown it in the past, or can you be a new farmer and get this insurance?
Anybody can get this one. Let me double check real quick, because I wrote down who's eligible. The farmers are eligible, processors, investors, lenders.
Really? So it's just really a gamble on the weather, basically.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Are there Las Vegas odds on this thing?
I'm sure the company gets their 5%, whatever it works out to.
Whatever happens, win or lose, right?
That's right.
Does it work better than polling statistics?
Yeah, Scott, we'll be sure to cover that a little, especially as we get into next season, obviously, for sure. And that'll be a great topic that we'll be able to put up on the expo as well.
Yeah.
Great topic.
Yeah. It's all,
But
it's
let
great
me-
to
let
see
me-
these tools.
But there's no insurance out there to cover a hot crop, right? I mean, because the risks probably are so incredibly high, right? That nobody'd want to touch that.
No, a hot crop is illegal, so you can't touch it.
Well, no, I meant that if you inadvertently create a hot crop, instead of just eating the whole thing, is there insurance to cover that if your crop goes hot?
No,
I didn't think so.
Your best insurance is good genetics, right?
correct.
Yeah.
And this is the only one that you can have any coverage if it does go hot, but it's still based
Weather
on
related.
weather.
Oh, okay, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Which could impact, that could be a cause and effect there. Yeah.
It could be.
Mhm. All
Well,
right.
Scott, thanks for that update and thanks for letting us know about that. And like I say, we'll cover that in certainly in a future show, and certainly at the expo. We'll certainly make sure that the information is available for everybody.
All right.
So thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
So Tom Dermody, if I said that right, Tom, help me if I'm wrong there, but
It's
Dermody. How do you say it?
Dermody.
Dermody. Okay. He's a senior market analysis. Tom is a hemp industry veteran with a specialty in non and for-profit program development. These experiences have made him keenly aware and a recognized leader of the hemp market internet workings. Tom leads industry grain and fiber coverage on behalf of PanXchange and it grew a key growth area headed in 2020 and beyond. So Tom, we're very grateful that you can take time out of your busy day and your forecasting for us and help us understand these crazy and elusive markets that we have out there. So.
Well, great, and thanks again for having me. If I could just ask to be enabled as the host so I could share my slides, that would be great. But just a little bit further details on me. I'm based in Denver, Colorado, and have had kind of an interesting maturation into the hemp industry. I was fortunate to be boots on the ground in the rush of 2015, where I kicked off what's called the Industrial Hemp Research Foundation, which set the ground floor for how public and private entities can leverage the research capacities of particularly land grant institutions to validate the use cases of industrial hemp. That job got me involved with a certified seed business, commonly known as Bija Hemp, has a strong footing in the Central Plains market, as well as Colorado. But I've always been focused on how we can expedite the process of enough standardization for this market to further mature. And fortunately for me, PanXchange wanted to expand its coverage, and since July, I have been working diligently to establish benchmark pricing for hemp grains and fiber products, specifically with the end goal of offering a trading platform to increase the liquidity of the market. Just bear with me for a second. Just my screen should be loading here. Sorry.
So Tom, you're based in Colorado right now, right?
Yes, sir. I've been here going on 6 years, and previously lived and worked in DC as a crop diversification specialist, most notably with National Family Farm Coalition, and did a brief stint with Citizen Trade Campaign during the TPP fights of early 2014. And I'm sorry, it looks like I'm having
Are you able to share?
it looks like I'm being blocked out from sharing my slides.
Try again. Should be able to share. Hit share.
If not, Dave, you got them, right?
I don't know if you sent them over.
It looks like there's a system. I'm getting a block from the host, so just bear with me for a second on that.
We love technology. It's so great, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes for a good time when it works, and otherwise, not. Just bear with me.
So a little question everybody can put in the chat while we're waiting here. We can talk about it. Where does everybody sit with their harvest for this year?
Yeah.
People, they still have some on the field. Have everybody got it in right now? course, we're getting some beautiful, beautiful summer weather here right now to finish this whole process up.
Yeah, how fortunate is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you better enjoy it because it's going to be ending around this weekend. So,
Yeah. Get your outside work done.
And Dave, just as a safeguard, I did just send you the slides.
All right, I'll pull up Outlook and look for that. So
if you wouldn't mind pulling those up when you have a chance, we can jump right in. But
sounds
no, just to pick up on your question, though, I think this summer, as opposed to last year, afforded most folks an extra 2 to 3 weeks. But on account of the increasing, let's say, liabilities presented by THC compliance, the vast majority of harvest has been completed as of, let's call it the second or third week of October. I don't think this market allows people to bear as much risk in that final week of production. And all around, it sounds like a pretty good year for most producers that stuck with it. Not nearly as much in the way of failed THC readings so far this year. And the other interesting piece, of course, is the diffusion of acres to service regional or state-based processors. You don't see the kind of extreme interstate transport that we got last year. And just to kick things off, for a point of reference, PanXchange has been around for 10 years. The founder and CEO of the company is a former Cargill trader who recognized that emerging commodities need to have the same services and benefits that more established operators enjoy. They've played in tons of different markets over the years. For your listeners, you may have come across PanXchange either by way of its frac sand division or the animal feeds market that was very active in the early 2010s, if you will. Right now, we are the de facto benchmark provider for U.S. frac sands, which is kind of pinning on the election, let's say, but still an interesting market to participate in. As it relates to our Denver office, our folks are dedicated to industrial hemp. As of 2019, we operate an OTC marketplace for the cannabinoid-containing products. And as of our October issue, we have released 2 formal benchmarks concerning hemp grain and fibers, or more readily, true hemp, which is the correct terminology for how to refer to a bale of hemp stalks before processing begins.
Oops, sorry, I'm hitting the buttons and I tried to go back.
Going back, one slide, please. Thanks.
All right.
And really the goal and something that I think is keenly important as it relates to the hemp market is our primary goals are to enhance transparency, spur industry development, and increase the certainty of supply that these nascent markets, whether it's hemp or another emerging commodity, require. As an important note, and something that I believe fundamentally sets PanXchange apart from other groups that report on pricing, is that our benchmarks are accounted based on actual trading activity that occurs in our platform. And to that end, the other important piece is we vet participants to ensure that they are the legitimate seller or the legitimate buyer of that product. We don't assess prices from trade associations, brokers who have a interest in the volatility of the market or alike. And that is something that has really gained notoriety for our company, not only in hemp, but something that I'm really proud of. And if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, please.
Before we go off that slide, you have a comment in there about true hemp, concerning hemp grain and true hemp. Give me your definition of true hemp.
Sure. So true hemp is actually the existing term used for HS code or harmonized traffic code designation. And true hemp refers to a bale of hemp that is raw, not redded, but not yet decorticated. So
that's what you're talking about earlier. Okay.
Visual example is it's simply a bale of hemp that is at the farm gate or in process to be delivered to a facility for secondary processing into long, short fibers and or those really interesting herd derivatives that are showing more interest on the market. And one of the pieces that we'll get into is that definition lets us set a nice, manageable term to help evaluate what are the qualitative differences that make a bale of hemp in Montana different from a bale of hemp that we see, in the Southeast, or, most notably on the import market. Happy to get into this further, but in aligning with HS code designation, we're setting both our domestic valuation process as well as being able to, on a month-to-month basis, assess that price against imported or exported product. And it's one of the key features that I think is necessary for us to consider as it relates to the value of that product.
Yeah, like you were saying, more standardization. Yep.
Oh, it's my second favorite word next to profit. It just to kind of, our process, we start in this top left corner by vetting growers, processors, traders, and alike to then build our methodology. But the important feature that I'd share with you folks is that we do adhere to IOSCO guidelines, which is the International Security certification body for any operating exchanges. We embed that into any market that we're working within to ensure that we are the preferred vendor for buyers and sellers, but also for the purposes of developing basis points for future derivatives exchanging if and when that market offers enough liquidity. As it relates to the ease of business, we are solicited on a daily basis by registered trade houses to see if and when they can participate in this market. And part of our push at the moment is to offer the ease of doing business in the grain and fiber market in particular. There's a huge amount of opportunity in substituting hemp-based products for existing agricultural products in different market regions. And those traders aren't going to try to call the hemp phone book or registrant list. They want to have the ease of validating a product and getting it to their facilities as quickly and efficiently as possible. And last but certainly not least, for folks who are interested, we do publish a monthly publication surrounding price and trending, which is extremely valuable for the planning purposes. I generally say the most valuable of our work occurs from October to January, when folks are deciding what kind of hemp they want to grow and at what scale. And with that, if you wouldn't mind jumping to the next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about where the market's at. I know the top of this is probably fairly familiar, but it is important to note that I think the Michigan Department of Ag is doing a great job staying in line with the FSA crop report, in that we do see inconsistencies across the country. By our estimates, FSA is underreporting acres to the tune of 30 to as much as 40%. It doesn't appear that issue is occurring in Michigan, which is hugely important for how the federal government offers support within that state. And to give you a very real-time example, states that are underreporting to FSA are endangering their crop insurance eligibility. And that could really be a problem for folks that are just starting to show some profitability or anticipating the need to expand acres, because by and large those products are the cheapest on the market when compared to privately held crop insurance products. But more readily, the important piece that I see in Michigan is a healthy amount of product diversification. Cannabinoids are still holding the highest percentage by product type, but that healthy amount of grain acres can not only elevate the resulting price of sale, but also ensure that folks have, let's say, a certainty of supply when making their own decisions for the 2021 year. One notable opportunity that I foresee as it relates to the Michigan market is the expansion of grain acres within the state. Especially up in the peninsula, you have top tier access to Canadian buyers and secondary processors to ease the burden of transitioning to a row crop style hemp grain model. But on the other side, it's also important to recognize the proximity to underserved markets, particularly the Northeast. To give you an idea, only 2% of cannabinoid production occurred in the Northeast, and processors are starting to have a keen need to purchase product, and our production window, let's say, extends from the northern tip of Virginia well into the Michigan market. So I'd really like to stress for folks that are looking to find a home for that product, soliciting purchases from the Northeast may give you an opportunity. Of course, as a OTC marketplace, we're certainly happy to support that type of work as well. But let's take one step back for a second and talk about some seismic changes, let's say, in the CBD market. As you folks probably well know, tolling arrangements are the preferred transaction method, but increasingly processors are offering biomass extraction and foregoing a tolling fee, so as to maintain the actual value of the product and forego any liability issues. And I think that trend is going to continue to stick out until we have the oversupply that started in 2019 resolved. And something to look at in selecting a processor is whether they have in-house or external THC remediation service for that crude oil product. The recent determinations by DEA are certainly driving that, but it is the key bottleneck that we foresee in the 2020 season. And just a critical vetting question to ask any processor that you're considering engaging with, whether that's for purchase or a tolling split methodology. Now, earlier this year, we did see a modest upswing in biomass and crude sales that resulted from the Delta 8 interest level, but that has since stifled, and that backlog is supporting the now present need for THC remediated broad spectrum distillate. And that is a trend that we foresee continuing on account of DEA as well as state issues concerning THC percentages for product that is going to be sold out of state. I haven't seen anything from Michigan to that effect, but if you're looking for a good example of what those regulations might look like, I'd encourage you to look at the recently released New York State regulations that are open for public comment, as well as the Colorado regulations, because if those hold true, let's say, it's likely that other states will seek to adopt that intra-processor allowance, but for any product that is leaving a given state, THC remediation is going to be a key feature of servicing that client. And another, good indicator for folks that are within your target market, and I feel bad saying this first and foremost, is the lack of productivity that the Pacific Northwest will offer to the market this year will increase the spot purchase period for just about anywhere across the country. In effect, we're looking at sizable losses in production, and that is opening up new market channels. By way of comparison, folks who utilized the Colorado crop last year then went up to Oregon to make that purchase of more product necessary to fill their machines. And because of the lack of product in the Pacific Northwest, that need for product is going to head more readily eastward towards Michigan or other Central Plains states. So definitely keeping an eye on how that offers opportunity to the market. And just to reiterate, for folks that are looking for out-of-state points of sale, I think the best market to try to sell into right now is the Northeast. Just a sheer lack of production, well below our estimates for this year, is on place within the Northeast, and that really spans New York State, Pennsylvania for our purposes, but then the newer markets of Massachusetts and as far as Maine could really be a good point of sale for folks as far away as Michigan right now. But I think that the prices as they stand right now forego competition from west of Michigan to service the Northeast. And do you guys have any questions that I could address in this section for you?
I've got some questions, but I'm not sure if they're right here or other places. I grew some grain last year, and about 15,000 pounds of it. And I think everybody's having the same problem, whether it be grain, or whether it be fiber, whether it be the biomass, the CBD, finding that buyer. So let's just talk about grain. Let's not worry about CBD right now, but grain. Mm-hmm. So I put my product up on what social medias I could, Hemp Raw Marketplace, other places like that. So how do growers get in touch with these buyers to find them, or what's the best way to do that?
Sure. And first and foremost, I think it's a question of what are you offering and how quickly can you attract that buyer. And one of the key features that I see on the grain side is whether someone has an existing microbial test on that lot that is current within 60 days. As it relates to finding those buyers, I think, on account of COVID, looking for groups like PanXchange that offer a marketplace is a first option. But second to that, different states operate listing boards for, let's say, emerging crops. I believe Michigan offers something to that effect currently, but the last gap stop that I foresee, and happy to talk about this further on an individual basis, is if you have a listing at the ready, we're in a position at PanXchange to make those referrals prior to our marketplace being live. And just to kind of put a short note on that as well, given your proximity to Canada, if you have dry grain, there are folks in Canada who will absolutely pick that product up for screening and dehulling purposes quite readily right now. The Canadian grain market has suffered a little bit. So if you're willing to take on a slightly lower price than what you can get in the States, you can certainly offload that material to Canada. I wouldn't advise that for folks who are, let's say, south of Illinois. Certainly better to try to play into those markets, but Canadian producers do buy hefty amounts or even smaller lots to simply build that customer base because they foresee the need to participate in the Central Plains market as a key feature of remaining competitive in the years to come.
I know Americans right now, because of COVID, aren't allowed to go into Canada. So does that pose any problems if you want to move grain to Canada?
No, so long, there is an allowance for logistics cross-border to still readily occur. So you do have to book a licensed freight carrier to actually take the product over the border for you. But that I haven't seen any major hiccups with respect to cross-border sales at this point.
Any other questions? I've been checking our chat. Let's see.
And this is probably just a key piece to look at. I feel particularly bullish about the hemp grains market what, a key feature is producers have, let's say, shed more and more of their CBD acres to focus on hemp grain production that more readily fits in their established farm practices. And to give you an idea, in 2014, 80% of Canadian grain was sold in the US. And at this point, 70% of that grain is now being sold in the US. And with good reason, that 10% difference accounts for the vast majority of production that we see here in the States right now. And I foresee cold press oil processors chipping away at that previously reliant import market as a key feature of what's offering the stability for producers to make the transition to hemp grain. But to your comment earlier, the other interesting feature presented by COVID is that American buy-side clients are demonstrating a preference for American-made hemp grains. And that is a huge bellwether towards not only competing for those previously imported acres, but supplanting them and offering a more consistently available product. At the height of COVID, that the transfer was quite limited, but we've seen a healthy upswing in levying a price that remains competitive and attracting folks. And to give you an idea on that, what we're seeing for prices on the organic side is as low as $1.05 and as high as $1.25 per pound, which at an average grain yield of 1,200 pounds an acre is a very nice return for producers, even while they're making the transition. With respect to conventional grain, we're seeing between 45 and 55 cents a pound. That 45-cent number is for producers that are reliant on secondary processing occurring in Canada. And that 55-cent price is for folks who are working with local cold press oil cleaners or processors, depending on their configuration. But for conventional, that is definitely a strong price. But I foresee organic acres really being the biggest growth area amongst hemp grain.
So that organic was $1.05 to $1.25, you're saying?
Yes, sir.
And then the non-organic would be up to 55 cents. That's a pretty big swing. Yeah.
Yeah, and not the nice thing, but a critical feature of that is Canada's pricing set a reasonable floor, and those prices have not moved much at all. But it is important to be cognizant that Canada has such a commanding lead in production overall that price floor is not going to drop out as drastically in the near term as anything we're seeing on the CBD side.
I interviewed a gentleman from an Australian hemp association, and I guess Canada is just flooding hemp hearts in through Aldi's into Australia. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and part of it's interesting because Canadian sellers have been looking to find different homes for their excess grain beyond what they can sell in the US. And part of the reason that the push is being made in Australia now is to build that local consumer basis. And that's part of the equation. But the second and more interesting piece is in the 2016-2017 period, Canadian hemp grain producers heavily marketed their export product to Korea, and that did not work out in their favor. There were a whole host of issues that precluded that sale from closing, and that excess capacity is now being pushed into the Australian market. But I actually see it as a benefit, because if the Australian hemp market is going to remain competitive, it's increasingly reliant on a consumer trend. And if you don't have the product to build that demand, you're going to have a very hard time transitioning to a local domestic market. And that's ultimately why U.S. producers are having a good year, in that, the availability of Canadian hemp grain built that consumer demand, and now domestic producers can chip away at servicing that supply. Any other questions?
Tom, could you tip your camera down just a little bit for me? Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And one of the other things that we're very interested in is the timeliness of an AFCO determination that'll open up the animal feeds market, particularly for hemp protein cake. Right now, as well as hemp hearts and hemp seed oil are doing, that is increasingly putting pressure on finding points of sale for the protein cake. Not sure if you guys have ever pressed some oil, but you get about a 1-to-8 ratio by volume. And this is creating a price point that is becoming increasingly competitive. And then it's a question of increasing volumes. But the other important feature that I think is worth consideration is, if and when a favorable AFCO determination comes in, that will incentivize a necessary grading and preventative control measure for hemp grains that has stifled production here in the U.S. and is still a common problem in Canada. There is rumors of a preventative control being listed, but still too early to make the call on if and when that'll be available. Anything I could address for you guys on hemp grains before we start talking about true hemp?
I have a lot of questions on it, but I don't want to take away the time. I'm making, and there are a number of people out here too that are the same thing, but I'm pressing my grain into oil, making the cake. I'm doing the hemp hearts. So I've got a lot of questions, but I think I'll probably take them off and talk to you later about them. So I don't want to slow down our process here today.
Yeah, no worries at all. Happy to take those questions at your convenience. Now, just to kind of set the stage, we talked a little bit about our definition of true hemp is aligned with the definition offered for harmonized traffic codes, which is a nice feature to allow us to compare the domestic market with the impacts of the existing import market. But what we see with true hemp is a classic issue of a lack of certainty of supply, meaning that the folks who have been importing true hemp bales or semi-processed hemp bales have had a really tough year. COVID increased the price of ocean freight anywhere between 3 and 5x, which all but stopped the importation of true hemp in the heavier days of COVID. But that presents an opportunity for domestic suppliers to again, chip away at that existing market demand. And with that said, the key feature and something that we monitor closely is what is the percentage of bast fiber content in a given bale of hemp related to its value. And within the U.S. Central Plains, we are starting to see an interest in utilizing those grain stocks more readily. But the trade-off in growing hemp grain is you don't get much in the way of bast fiber content relative to a true fiber production scheme. And to give you an idea there, within the U.S. Central Plains market, we're seeing true hemp bales go between 5 and 8 cents a pound. And in the Southeast market, where folks are adhering to, let's say, the traditional method of growing hemp for fiber production, those prices are north of 12 cents a pound. And it's always a game of trade-offs, but the important feature to recognize is the U.S. Central Plains has an abundance of herd-rich stocks that folks can acquire and are seeking to purchase, initially for the animal bedding market, but I think second to that, and where more profitability for producers lies, is in the biocomposite market. Having nicely cleaned, sized herd offers folks the feedstock to produce biocomposites more readily than what we're seeing in the Southeast right now. As it relates to the Southeast market, the push is for what I describe as functional textiles, specifically PPE equipment and or equivalents in that kind of interesting market of sustainable fashion textile grade material. There is certainly, a good reason for that to be a companion crop to the existing cotton market. And proximity does avail folks a very interesting opportunity. But I think for your listeners out there, when you're talking about your stocks, recognizing what value is in those stocks is paramount, so that you're not shorting yourself or selling yourself short as the market matures. And as a comment there, the availability of grain stocks is going to be a key feature of what type of true hemp is marketable within the Central Plains market. And don't feel like that doesn't preclude you from looking at true fiber, but I think buyers are going to be more readily absorbing those grain stocks as opposed to being prepared to receive and utilize true fiber production anytime soon. And as a cautionary note, unlike the CBD market, the sheer volumes and shipping distances of these products does limit the primary processing step for true hemp to at most 150 miles when you have that nice bast fiber content. But more realistically, finding buyers that are within 75 to 100 miles for those grain stocks is absolutely critical, or else freight is not going to make that a profitable endeavor.
So Tom, is there a premium paid for the true hemp for organic as well, or is that really just plain to the grains?
It's really in the grains. I haven't seen anyone make the call except in small lot purchases for a preference of organic true hemp just yet. And as it relates to those grain stocks, I don't think that's necessarily a major driver. Folks that are looking for organic grade textiles, bit of a different story, but again, I think the market is too early to bifurcate between conventional and organic production at this time.
Yeah, you're not eating your shirt, but I thought it was interesting. One of our iHemp members makes milling equipment to take that hemp herd fine enough and dry enough for existing injection molded plastics. Mm-hmm. But it would take like 50 to 70,000 acres just to offset the oil production for one small plastics manufacturer. It's like there's a lot of potential here. We're right now we can go up to like 30% hemp fiber as a filler.
Yep.
And the textiles I thought was interesting, where the U.S. military is looking at it because for a few reasons, but one of them is if you got shot in a cotton shirt, you're going to get infected. Where with hemp, it's naturally antibacterial. You don't get those infection issues.
Yeah, and you bring up a really interesting point about the scalability that true hemp requires. And when you're talking about one facility needing 50,000 acres, the other problem becomes you don't have enough planting stock to service that facility. I mean, nationwide, that's about the amount of planting seed that we would see in the row crop market generally. So there's the chicken and the egg issue of how do we indicate that someone needs to raise enough seed to service that kind of build out. But as a bellwether there, overall crop acreage in the U.S. for, if you combine grain and true hemp acres, sits at about 42% of all planted acres nationwide this year. And the growth that sector is seeing is strongly driving the seed multiplication market, and in turn driving down the cost of production in the out years. So I'm quite bullish on how those acres will expand, and would go as far to say that next year it's reasonable to assume that we'll see 60+% of all acres grown for either hemp grain or true hemp production.
But will that hurt the value?
No, because you still have a critical mass of existing supply, so the floor isn't going to as drastically drop out as we've experienced with the CBD side.
Okay.
So yes, prices will likely decrease, but not to the degree where it doesn't support the transition to these markets.
Okay.
And just seeing a question here about what the expected true hemp yield is per acre. It's kind of a doozy of a question, because it depends, of course, on your local growing environment. But as a benchmark, I think at a minimum you need to be able to produce 4 to 4.5 tons per acre to remain competitive. But I think the mark that folks want to shoot for long term is 6 to 6.5 tons per acre, which, when you're seeding between 55 and 60 pounds to the acre, is definitely a workable number. But I would caution folks as well on underseeding those acres. You want to have a robust plant population density on a per acre basis. And I've seen folks try their hand at seeding 30 to 35 pounds per acre, and they're just not getting enough yield on a per acre basis, with that seeding rate. So just wanted to throw that out there for consideration.
Is there much of a market, or is there a market for the CBD fiber? I'm able to separate the CBD plants, the herd and fiber, and so I'm wondering if that fiber has a market anywhere.
I think it's easier to market the herd that results from those CBD plants. And the reason being, when you have a horticulture style CBD plant, for lack of a more professional word, a bushy plant, those nodules produce small qualitative differences in the fiber structure. And that makes it increasingly difficult to market. But I think if you can efficiently strip that fiber off, there is potential to market the herd itself that results from those plants. And there is some difference of opinion there. I know out in the market, here in Colorado, for instance, there's a group that is working specifically with CBD stocks to produce let's call it a craft paper set. But for their needs, it's all about clean stripping that fiber off to get a hold of the high cellulosa content that herd provides.
Interesting.
Right now, we're able to separate that, and we're taking the herd, and it's being used in some plastic manufacturers. They're taking some of it, and then we're going to use it as animal bedding as well. We just got to chop it up. It's too pokey, too branchy at the way it is when it comes out of the way we're doing it right now. So we just got to process it one more time and get it down. Fine.
Nice little classification step, I'm sure, along the way. But maybe
another question that came up in the chat here. I don't know if you see that or not. Has anyone been able to achieve such a high yield in the north, in the Great Plains, North Great Plains? I think they're saying.
Sure, and that, where how to best, but I've definitely seen it on the research front of things. For folks that aren't monitoring it, I do think that some great work has been done by what's commonly referred to as the multi-state initiative, where roughly 14 land grant institutions are replicating different trial design systems, mostly for THC verification purposes. But second to that, once variety selection has occurred, they're taking those varieties and planting them at much higher or much lower seeding densities to give the best agronomic advice that they can offer. And I do think that folks have made some headway there. I would consider Montana part of the Great Northern Plains for our purposes, and I definitely have seen folks make some headway at it and actually exceeding that 5 ton per acre mark. But that's also still at, let's call it pilot scale. I haven't seen anyone, turn it up to, 2,000 acres plus on that front. I think where the highest yield opportunities I've seen are spread between Virginia, heading west towards Indiana, and out as far west as Colorado on our Eastern Central Plains market, which is roughly 2.5 hours east of Denver. And
we have just a couple minutes, and we're going to break for some news. How are we doing on?
And this might be a little too boring, but I do think it's an important slide just to recognize which parts of the hemp product market is at. Ultimately, the CBD market is right in between this oversupply to vertical integration phase. The hemp grains market is domestically sitting at the cash market begins, and internationally on the vertical integration M&A side of things. And the true hemp market is way back here at the new supply enters the market phase domestically. And, different folks, have a difference of where they want to be in with respect to participating. But I do think it's really critical to keep an eye on what makes the most sense for your particular operation to jump into hemp. And just wanted to throw that out there for consideration. And this is actually a white paper that was produced by PanXchange about how market evolution occurs. It's available on our website for folks that would like to chat about that. But just in the interest of time, happy to jump on to the next slide as well. And I think we've touched on this, but again, one of the issues that I foresee as it relates to the 2021 season is USDA pulling back on hemp loan eligibility. I think that is a difficult consideration for folks who would like to be utilizing those funds to support their specific hemp ventures. And while it's great that we have the extra time to look at THC action limits and testing criteria, this is probably the most fundamental example of the offtake or negative trade-off that extending the pilot program phase has awarded. And that is not just available in one state versus another. USDA has said that they are going to hold back on loan eligibility until all states are operating under a prescribed management plan or USDA supervision, in the cases of Mississippi or New Hampshire. As it relates to the CBD market, something that I think will help, again, expedite the process of normalization is the AOSCA certified clone and feminized seed process. AOSCA National approved that earlier this year, and state departments of agriculture, in conjunction with their AOSCA vested member programs, are assessing varieties for the first tiers of certified clones and feminized seed, which paired with loan eligibility will be standardizing this industry in a much needed direction to forego the risk ultimately that's borne by producers specifically.
Would you explain who is AOSCA?
It's the Association of Official Seed Certifying Agencies. They are the body that is responsible for issuing, you may see it as a blue or a purple tag on all the other crops you may be involved with, but their responsibility is to produce certification modules and then implement them at a state and regional level. so that producers and ultimately buyers have a high degree of confidence as to the value and uniformity of a product. It's very, for on the grain and fiber side of the market, it's a very common thing to see a lot raised with certified seed. And unfortunately, on the CBD side, it's taken, a considerable amount of time to develop those processes. But again, it's about offering the validation that when someone sells you a bag of seed, it is what they say it is, which can offer huge amounts of assurances across the supply chain. And it's really one of the most fundamental parts of our modern agricultural system. And I do think it's important to recognize that ayahuasca works in non-genetically modified seeds predominantly for folks that are considerate of that issue as it relates to their own supply chains.
Okay. Good.
And just to I could talk about that all day, so happy to take any questions you guys might have. But another key feature as it relates to the grain market that I'm just going to stress as much as possible is there is an excellent opportunity to chip away at the import grain market. And if you're looking to validate, expansion or otherwise, this is a key opportunity to continue to follow along so that you have the foresight to price effectively against that imported product. And that is, again, something that I think is not unique to hemp, but certainly unique to hemp grains relative to other product types. Just in the interest of time, I do think this fiber facelift, it's about finding standards that align with the existing natural fibers market. It's kind of a worthwhile opportunity so as to expand the marketability of your products. There's some really great work happening via NC State right now down in North Carolina. And then another group that I think has a critical role to play in this is the ASTM division that handles natural fibers grading, but they haven't shown as much interest as you would expect just yet. But subject to the productivity that we're seeing in the 2021-2022 season, that could be a major bellwether for how we move forward with this industry.
Yeah, and I would caution people against chasing dual or tri crops and see what your find a buyer and grow the genetic that's going to be best for them. That's probably going to be the most successful.
Yeah, and I did see a question here that are native to North America. The short answer is no. Most of the ayahuasca certified seeds for fiber production originated in Europe or Asia, depending on where you are in the country. Folks have licensed those varieties in, worked them through the certification process. And there might be an announcement of a native registered variety coming here shortly, but that's as much as I can say for the time being. Do you guys have any other questions I could address for you at the moment?
Well, again, Scott, I've got a bunch, but I'll be calling a little later.
I appreciate your time, Tom. This is really good. This is good. We should do this again.
Yeah.
When will your exchange be available?
So we are for cannabinoid products. The exchange is up and running. That it's all the information is again available on our website. And right now, as it relates to the grain and fiber side, we are taking we're taking on price indicators, and those folks that are vetted through the process will be invited to our beta testing of the platform close, I'd say end of December or early next year, just as we kind of push things along internally. But I would stress that for us to be able to extend the platform's offerings, building our price indication network is a critical feature. So for folks who are interested in getting involved sooner rather than later, feel free to either reach out to hemp@panexchange.com, or my direct email is tdermody@panexchange.com. And again, thanks for the time, guys. It's really been a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Tom.
All right. Mike Brennan, you have a little bit of news for us? 420 Post?
I do. Of course, the elections are on everyone's minds this week in particular. We still don't know who the president is, but we do know that marijuana won around the state and around the country. 7 new communities in Michigan decided with the ballot initiatives to expand licensing of either medical or adult use marijuana. The list is at my primary website, michiganmarijuanareport.com. And then also around the country, there were 7 new states that either came up with or had a ballot initiative that would legalize medical marijuana or adult use marijuana. And those include states of New Jersey, South Dakota, Mississippi, Arizona, and Montana. So I think we're now up to 15 or 16 states where adult use cannabis is allowed around the country. A number of other ones allow medical marijuana, but we're kind of, I wouldn't say we're reaching a tipping point. Kind of depends on what happens next, partly with the presidential race, partly with Congress, on whether it gets decriminalized. And if it gets scheduled from 1 to 2, then the CBD boom, I think, is going to really take off, because then it'll have more protections for doing medicinal sorts of things. It remains to be seen. I don't know. We're all figuring out who's going to win, but I guess we'll find out here in the next few days, and then hopefully it'll become a topic for the new Congress that we'll be seeing in January, and hopefully they'll take it up and realize that this is a big trend, and that perhaps, this is what people want. So why not go with it, right? Let's keep our fingers crossed. Blaine?
All right. Well, yes, a lot of elections did take place, obviously, and we'll all have to figure out where this all pans out for the hemp industry. It sounds like, mostly from what I've been reading on a lot of other news places, that it sounds like that we're going to be sitting in a pretty good position when all the dust clears of this whole thing. So we'll look forward to where that comes out. The Agriculture Marketing Service, another opportunity for us to all put some comments in. And on this one, I suggest everybody put a comment in on this. Not so much that we're worried about what they're going to do with this, but again, the numbers, just the interest is going on. So what this is for, they want to do a collection of program information, and so they have to ask for permission from the budget management, and they have to put in the Federal Register to be able to do this. So the agency is the Agriculture Marketing Service of USDA, and what they're looking for invites public comments about their intentions to request money from the budget Office of Management budget for new information collection to collect data on hemp production through a producer survey. This survey is necessary to identify data in the emerging hemp industry and for administration of the domestic hemp program. This is going to be run through the University of Kentucky, who's developed it, and they're going to tabulate all the data and be able to put out the reports that we need. So we'll put that up on the website. There is a whole page there in the Federal Register as well that you can look at. But basically, I think everybody needs to comment on this. You have to December 15th to, this is a great, nothing else, just a great idea. Please continue and go with it. Again, we want the numbers to show that we have the interest out there in the hemp industry altogether. So please, when we'll get that up there, please put some comments in on that. And this is just for an interesting thing here. A Texas holding company that makes CBD is joining the market for hemp-based meat alternative, which plan to manufacture the products in Montana. So this is where the hemp protein flour is coming in and some other things. So that'll be interesting to pay. Maybe we'll have the and possible hemp burger. Who knows as we move forward on that.
Mhm.
A couple updates on the expo. We have had to move to a total virtual platform for this one. It's still going to be January 22nd and 23rd. But with the new rules that have come down regarding indoor activities and meetings, we just feel that we can't continue to go on and not put that on. So we're going to have a great virtual one. We'll talk more about that in future shows. One of the big things to look forward to, and we will have the website up, will be the Hempy Awards this year. We talked a little bit about that, but if you're making a hemp product of any kind, you'll definitely want to enter that in and have that be in that fun competition for that.
Is there going to be like a hemp statue? I can't wait to see this. So
Yeah, we're working on that. We're hoping we're going to have it made out of a hemp product as well.
Oh yeah, very good touch. Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna keep it all hemp things that we can. So
There you go.
all right, here we go. The ending of the show, you can always tell. All right, so this week we have stuffed mushrooms, which is just one of my favorite things to have. I love mushrooms. This requires a little bit more work, but it's well worth it in the end. So you get 24 medium to large button mushrooms, 3 to 4 tablespoons of, they say this other thing in here about some oil, but we're going to replace that with hemp seed oil, obviously.
Of course.
3 to 4 cloves of fresh garlic, 2 to 3 shallots, zest of lemon, sprigs of parsley, 1 tablespoon of sweet white miso, and pinch of rosemary, pinch of dry thyme, half a cup shelled hemp seeds, a whole quarter cup whole wheat breadcrumbs, sea salt, and olive oil. And we'll have it up on there. How to do this? We prepare the oven to 375, and you do a few things with the hemp seed oil, and you place the remaining on a skillet, and then your garlic and salt, and you place over the medium heat. When the shallots begin to sizzle, stir, and then the lemon zest, and voila! Within a few minutes, 10 to 12 minutes, you have some stuffed mushrooms. They just sound wonderful. And we'll try to have them on the show. I'll probably get some pictures of those on the show next week. So with that, we're a little over time, so I'm going to cut my other information short.
Any other questions for Tom while we still have them? If so, toss them in the Q&A. Otherwise, thank
Everybody
you.
have a happy week.
A hempy week.
A happy week.
A happy week.
Yes, there you go. All right, see you all next week.
All right. Thanks again, Tom.
See everybody.
All right. Take care. Peace and love.